is absolutely wild as Vern Gagne's all-star wrestling goes coast to coast and continent to continent. The greatest wrestlers in the world.
He may be an apprentice carpenter, but I guarantee you he is a seasoned ring veteran.
I've been hit with bar stools, bar rags, barmaids.
I'm talking to you.
They're scared that Hulkamania's still running wild. Oh, yeah. I got a big fat wife and 9 kids at home, and I gotta feed them.
And take a look at Jesse the Body in real life.
Open your hand once if you would.
You want to see it?
This is absolutely unbelievable. Totally, completely out of control.
He's coming in over the top. Hey! Look out!
Hello, everybody. Welcome into AEWA Unleashed. We are the preeminent #1 podcast dedicated to telling the stories, reliving the memories of the American Wrestling Association. As you might notice, we are dropping this a little bit earlier than we would normally do. This is dropping on a Thursday. Normally we drop it on Tuesday. And as you can tell by the title, we had a big loss in the wrestling world, in the AWA, but more importantly for Mick and Joe. This is a tribute to somebody that you guys knew well. He was a friend, he was a mentor, he was a colleague, and he meant a lot to you guys. And today we are going to celebrate the extraordinary career of DeRusha, because we talk about wrestling, but guys, he was so much more than professional wrestling.
Well, you know, Joe worked a lot closer with Al than I did, but I knew Al for 50 years. And when you say he was so much more than wrestling, it's a drop in the hat. This guy did everything from a production standpoint, from the outdoor amusement business. He was a jack of all trades, and as carny can be, and that is, to me, that is the lovable part of DeRusha.
I could spend 3-4 hours doing a tribute to Al, but we got about an hour. But everything that you had just set up, Mick, I think it's a perfect segue to play a video, and I'm going to set this up. The video is an updated version of Al's induction video into the 2015 Minnesota Broadcasting Hall of Fame. Al's been inducted into the OABA Hall of Fame. That's the Outdoor Amusement Business Association, the Showman's League of America Hall of Fame. And then the video that we're playing here, you'll see at the end that he received an honor at the Tragos Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame this past summer. So I'm going to get this set up. Let's see. I want to share a screen, and it's going to be right here. So it's about 4 minutes and 12 seconds long. This will give you a lot of a background on what Mick said, that his career, incredible. So with that, tribute to my dear friend Al DeRusha.
Alvin Joseph DeRusha was born to George and Mary DeRusha on November 8th, 1935.
Video is... Why is the video not playing? Here, let me try this again.
Okay.
Video file.
Yeah, we've never had a problem with a video before. Everything when it plays is usually no problem. Okay, here we go.
Try that.
Alvin Joseph DeRusha was born to George and Mary DeRusha on November 8th, 1935, and was the youngest of 7 girls and 4 boys. He was born near Harriet Island in St. Paul, Minnesota. Al was just 8 years old when he started working for Leo Magel's carnival game concessions on the bassinet shows. He worked and traveled with carnivals until 1953. As a senior at Humboldt High School in St. Paul, Al enrolled in a school program that placed him in many part-time jobs. Al began his career in broadcasting in 1953 as a mailboy and prop man for WMIN-TV. It would be the start of a long and distinguished career in television. Al worked for 2 decades producing famous children's shows of the era.
Al DeRusha directed Lunch with Casey for most of its 2 decades on the air.
You couldn't wait to get to work the next day.
Hey, we're upside down, Ron. Get it, work.
Onions, onions, la la la. Onions, onions, la la la.
Hey! Another great bit they did was Jimmy Durante.
It ain't Miss Betty in a romper room.
Because it was so much fun.
He directed live remotes and election night broadcasts, including an election that featured future Vice President Hubert Humphrey. Al also directed all major Minnesota sports, including the Twins, North Stars, and Vikings, as well as college and high school sports. Al is an 8-year veteran of the Naval Reserve and was even certified as a correspondent with credentials to do stories for military documentaries. Starting in 1961, Al directed the weekly show for the American Wrestling Association.
All Star Wrestling.
He was also a promoter, a ring announcer,
This will be a 2 out of 3 fall match.
did play-by-play, and even was a referee for Hulk Hogan and a wrestler who would be the future governor of the state of Minnesota, Jesse the Body Ventura.
Oh, the table has gone over.
In 1985, Al's expertise in wrestling landed him a job with Vince McMahon's WWF. Al's career in the amusement industry began in the 1960s. He was inducted into the Midwest Showmen's Association and Showmen's League of America Halls of Fame. He is currently the Senior Vice President of the Outdoor Amusement Business Association, a trade association for the mobile amusement industry.
Despite the many hours away from home, Al has always found time for his family. He and his wife Marlene just celebrated their 69th anniversary. They have 4 children, 8 grandchildren, and 8 great-grandchildren. Al DeRusha's career in show business spans a remarkable 72 years. Al has worked with and directed more than 36 members of the Minnesota Broadcast Hall of Fame. From Lunch with Casey Jones and Roundhouse Rodney to Mel Jazz's matinee movies to the AWA. Al has been an integral part of the television industry in Minnesota. He is a member of the Minnesota Broadcast Hall of Fame, and today, Alvin Joseph DeRusha is honored to receive this recognition from the Tragos Thez Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame.
And that is all you need to know.
You know, I have to admit I teared up a couple of times.
Oh, whoops. I think when I deleted the video, it kicked Joe out accidentally. So we'll wait for Joe to come in. That was something, Mick, that we saw that was aired at the Tragos Hall of Fame, and it brought us to tears. And there's Joe. Sorry about that, Joe. When I was removing the video, somehow it kicked you from the studio as well because
No
you played. But we were just talking because I know that you're going to get into your friendship. That video was played unbeknownst to me. I didn't know it was going to be aired, and it got a standing ovation in Waterloo. And it warmed my heart, and it made me so happy to see that response for that video that you put together, which was just absolutely awesome.
It was awesome. Job well done, Joe. And regarding Waterloo, one of my regrets is not being able to speak with Al at Waterloo. And the reason being, after the presentation, after the evening's festivities were over, I tried to get to Al to say hello. He was surrounded by people, family and friends and colleagues, and there was just no way. And Al was not feeling the greatest, but God bless him, he had the strength to get to Waterloo for that induction. And so Al, he didn't stick around very long afterwards. So unfortunately, I didn't get an opportunity to talk to him and congratulate him firsthand, but it was heartwarming. Not only the video, Joe, but to see the outpouring of affection for Al was tremendous.
You know, Al, he always had a little quick quip or anecdote or story. Always was smiling, and if he did have a bad word about something or somebody or someone, it was instantly gone, because he just went back to being this happy, smiling person. For years, he's been compared to Captain Kangaroo, and,
yes,
which he looked like Captain Kangaroo. And for those who are those who are too young to remember, Captain Kangaroo was a mainstay on television.
That's a great comparison. That now that you've seen it, you've said it, I can't unsee it. I can't.
Chris,
unsee it.
People used to chant it at him when he would walk into the ring, and get the carrots out of your pocket. Where's Mr. Green Cheese? I mean, it was just, go ahead.
You know what? We could have and probably should have had a comparison, a side by side of Al and Captain Kangaroo. But I mean, do a search for yourself, and you'll see what I mean. I mean, there's, that's an older picture that was at the Hall of Fame ceremony this past summer. And that's the frail Al DeRusha, with, of course, the high flyers and his son Gary behind him. But I first met Al when I started with the AWA. Al was not there. He too had left for the WWF, and he had come back. I want to say it was maybe about February or March of '86. I know it was before Wrestle Rock, which was April 20th of '86, because Al directed it. That was his first big comeback to the AWA. And that picture there is just a selfie of Al and I. You can tell by our hair, we just had gotten done with a long editing session, and it was for the OABA Hall of Fame award videos. And I'll get to how we started working on that in a little bit, but that's how I first met Al when he came back to the AWA. He directed Wrestle Rock and then proceeded to come back and direct a lot of the live shows that we were doing, whether it was the Showboat in Las Vegas. He had done a couple, but then it went back to Mike Shields and myself. Al was he was the director at the ill-fated Whitewater taping. No fault of Al's. That was purely the crew and the production company that was hired to do it. So certainly not putting anything on Al for it. But when Al came back, he also did some ring announcing, but mostly he came back and started to run the small towns for the AWA, doing the spot shows, as we called them. And the company that Al ran those under, the company was called Assured. And if you look at the DeRusha name backwards, Assured.
Oh, wow.
And so that's where he ran them under. He stayed as long as he could, as long as the AWA still had a little bit of breath in its body or in its being. That he stuck around, and then, like many of us, I mean, we had to continue on. And Al went on to do the OABA, the Outdoor Amusement Business Association, and was also part of the Showman's League of America. Excuse me, both carnival entities that Al had been a part of, as you could see from the video that we had played. Al started in the carnival industry as a young boy and went full circle and got back into the carnival industry. And it would be years later, I believe it was 2000, or about 2002, 2003, when Al had called me up and asked me if I would like to edit and produce the award videos for the OABA and the SLA. And I said, of course. And that was the cement in what started to be a friendship and mentorship. That cemented our friendship. It grew into more because for about, I would say, a total of about 3 weeks out of every year, Al would come over and have the photos and have the magazines that he went and did his jam and jamborees with the OABA, where he would go to help raise money for the OABA and so forth. But Al would come over and sit with me. We would get this photo scanned. He would tell me about this legendary person in this carnival or in this show, and as I put in my Facebook post, every and I mean every edit session would always devolve into him telling stories, me asking questions of the AWA and its cast of characters. It's where he told me the story about Wally having, the Wally and the sock story. The Wally and the doorknob story, the Wally and the
are the sex and the doorknob connected though? They're two stories, two different stories.
Well, the doorknob became Wally's knob, shall we say. He replaced the doorknob with something that was about the same height, they're probably just, give it a little kiss. But the stories that Al would tell me about the guys that I grew up watching, the Ivan Putskys of the world, superstar Billy Graham, Billy Robinson, just I've not shared a lot of those stories. I mean, I've told them to people over the course of time, but I look back now and even at the time, I cherish them immensely, because I remember one time when Al was over. Our edit sessions would end up being 6, 8, 10 hours long, and we would be doing them for several days just to get them done. And as I've said forever, you take any two people, you put them into, you just put them together, and at some point you're going to stop and think, oh God, I can't wait till this is over. I just don't want to deal with them anymore. I don't want to, it's like, oh, what the fuck are you talking about? Blah, blah, blah. But I remember one time, and this would have been later on, probably in the right around the time when Al got inducted into the Broadcast Hall of Fame. Again, telling an old AWA story. And it was at that point where I just as I'm looking at Al, I just smiled. And in my own mind, I thought how fortunate I was to not only be sitting with him at that time and hearing yet another story about the AWA, but how I've been able to do that at that point for a good 10, 12 years. And it was something that I will remember for as long as I have, as long as I'm around and have a memory going on in my head. And now, sadly, those stories can no longer be told, at least straight from Al. But I have them in my head. I will cherish them. I will retell those stories, some of which I have shared here on AWA Unleashed. But I will continue his legacy and forever cherish the memories of him coming over to my house and edit them. And here's the kind of person that Al was. Just and I'm rambling on, and we might go over. So be it. I've got time today, but just a couple of stories.
This is an opportunity to tell those stories that you've heard from him. And you were his friend. He was your mentor. So you absolutely have all the right to tell these stories.
Well, and I appreciate it, but these are not AWA stories. These are not OABA stories. These are going to be Al DeRusha, the person stories, and just, the kind of person that he was. When Al would come over for these edit sessions every day, most every time, sometimes we'd order out lunch, but most of the time he would bring a little bag lunch that his wife Marlene, or Mar as he would refer to as the love of his life. But within every lunch, Al would always pack an extra piece of cheese, just straightforward American cheese in the plastic wrapper. And yeah, by the way, it's not really cheese. But Al would bring the piece of cheese, not for himself, not for me, not to add to a sandwich. He would bring it over for my dog. And every time he would say, "Hey, Polish Joe, is it okay if I give Buddy a piece of cheese?" And I got to the point where I would say, "Al, if you didn't give him a piece of cheese, I think Buddy would end up pissing on your leg." And so he would do that every single day when he would come over. It got to the point where when we were done, I felt obligated that I had to give my dog a piece of cheese. And before that, it was Rascal and Ellie, our two poodles. But he would do that every time. And he wouldn't just do it for my dog. No, he didn't bring cheese for my kids. But Al would bring, he would stop and get a bunch of nut goodie bars and bring them for my kids. In fact, when I told my kids, when I did the social media post, my kids messaged me and, saying the condolences. And then when I talked to my son, he brought up the memory of Al and him bringing the nut goodie bars. And to go even a step further, in the early 2010s, I was unfortunately going through some financial hardships, and Al would helped me out. He'd leave, unbeknownst to me, I'd start helping him out. Come back to my desk, and there underneath my keyboard, he'd leave $100. He went above and beyond that. Didn't have to. I didn't ask him. That was Al DeRusha. He was a kind-hearted, warm, decent human being. I apologize, but he has a special place in my heart, and again, as long as I'm around, I will have nothing but fond memories of Al. And as we started this episode, I'd gotten the reminder on my calendar alert that tomorrow would have been Al's 89th birthday. And I will wake up tomorrow. I will get that day of alert, and I will fondly remember the hours and hours and hours that I was graced to be in the presence of and working with Al DeRusha. And so for that, Al, it's not vodka, it's not brandy, it's not scotch, but I'll give you one of these and shut up now so that Mick and Chris can have a little bit of their say right now. Cheers to you. Na zdrowie, Al.
Well, first of all, Joe, we all felt the emotion and the sincerity from you, and you clearly are going to carry Al with you. And so many Al DeRusha stories that we're going to be telling over the years. I didn't have the relationship with Al that you did on a friendship basis. Mine was more of a business relationship. And it's funny, this is a wrestling podcast, and I got to talk about some of the wrestling stuff with Al, and I almost feel like it's totally out of place. But before I talk about how he helped me out on an SNR special, I remember Al was the ring announcer for a WCW show at the Roy Wilkins Auditorium. And I'm in the back, and I'm going to attempt to interview Lex Luger. And promoter Gary Juster had already told me, Lex is not going to be the easiest guy that you ever dealt with, but, cut your interview. Well, we start the interview, and this is during an intermission, and we're in a back room, and Al is making announcements in the ring, whatever, promoting something or the next show or whatever. 3 times we had to stop because Luger said to me, and this is a quote, "How fucking loud does that guy have to talk?" And If you knew Al, well, if you saw him at All Star Wrestling, you heard that booming voice of his. That I don't know if he was a soprano, a tenor. He sounded like a guy that got his nuts caught in a vice sometimes. But that was the charm of Al DeRusha. And it got to the point in the interview where Lex said, I can't do this. and Al had talked for about 2 minutes. And honest to God, it was like we're in another room and it was like an echo chamber. And that's how loud Al was. I love the guy personally. When I was going to do Saturday night at Ringside special, 1990, 2-year anniversary of the show. We're trying to get all the talent that we could from the old AWA to come in. And I remember Al really went to bat for me. He tried to get the Crusher to come in. He said, Mick, let me handle it. Fine, Al. He was so apologetic. He said, Crusher is just not the same guy. He doesn't feel comfortable in front of the cameras anymore. And oh God, well, I love that shot. Al DeRusha, Wally Carbo, and the Crusher. 3 Mount Rushmore AWA guys. But Al was so apologetic. He says, I can't get Crusher for you. He just doesn't feel comfortable with it and so on. But I was so grateful to Al. He appeared on the show with Wally Carbo, and we brought in Mad Dog Vachon as well, and the Baron. And that special, to me, just being in the company of those guys was like the greatest night of all the things that I've done in wrestling. Chris, I don't know if we have a couple of those SNR shots that we can put up with Al, but when the Dog and the Baron come into the room there, and Stan Kowalski and Al, and it's this brotherhood reunion of the AWA. And of course, Al is the guy that's holding court. He's got everybody. I mean, imagine this. You've got Mad Dog Vachon and Baron von Raschke and Wally Carbo, and Al DeRusha's the guy that he was directing even the conversations back then. I'm harkened back to that story, a couple of Al DeRusha stories, and this is what's great about Al, and especially going forward, Joe, and you know this. We're sad right now. We're going to miss the guy tremendously, but honest to God, he left us with some tremendous memories, and we know that's the way that Al would want to be remembered. He even joked at Wally Carbo's funeral, for God's sakes. We're up there looking at Wally, in the casket in the front of the room, and Wally's got like a half smile on his face. And Al said, that son of a bitch knows something and he's not telling us. And Al said, I expect Wally to sit up at any minute now and say it's all a rib. But there's an SNR shot, and honest to God, again, I talk about how great this night was. Stan Kowalski, Al DeRusha, Baron von Raschke, Mad Dog Vachon, and Larry Hennig. It was euphoric to be in their presence. And afterwards, we went to an Italian restaurant, and I've told this before. The people that were there immediately, and this has been years after the AWA was in its heyday, came over and were ecstatic. People, look who's here. Bob, it's Al DeRusha, it's Mad Dog, with autograph pads and everything else. And Al was absolutely in his glory. The other thing I would say about Al, and you and I know this very well, Joe, our vocabulary included the word gimmick because of Al DeRusha. Everything was a gimmick. And I didn't realize that in life, everything is a gimmick. It's all gimmick until you and I and Al were sitting at the Showboat cafeteria. And Al ordered a plate of spaghetti for lunch. No big deal. Well, he summoned the waitress over. Come here, dear. Come here. He says, can you give me another jar of that Parmesan gimmick? And I said, did I hear that correctly? And honest to God, I looked at him, and from that day on, and Joe, this is 30 some years later, gimmick is probably the word that I use most in my life outside of the F-bomb. Just a tremendous guy. And again, there's that story, the ringside timekeeper story. I'm sitting next to Al at ringside. I had just started with the AWA, and it's a show at the Minneapolis Auditorium. And Al's the announcer and the timekeeper. And I forget what the opening match was. Oh, God, that's one of my favorite pictures ever, by the way. You talk about Captain Kangaroo, and I'm not talking about me, by the way. The opening match was horrendous. And I forget who it was. And, you got that small crowd at the auditorium, towards the end of the AWA run. So you could hear everything. I mean, you could hear ringsiders behind you. You could hear a guy chewing popcorn upstairs. That's how quiet it was in the building. And Al, of course, is going to count down the time. 5 minutes elapsed time, whatever. We're about 2 minutes into the match, and Al looks at me and he shakes his head. And he says, 5 minutes elapsed time, 5 minutes. And this is about 2 minutes. Well, wrestling fans, they're kind of looking at their watches. Something's wrong here. And Al, he covers the microphone. He turns to me and says, this is the shits. I am not sitting through this. And at about the 6 minute mark, 10 minutes elapsed time, 10 minutes. And everybody, the ringsiders are just cracking up because they knew exactly what Al was doing. He made no bones about it. He didn't try to hide it. And he's just shaking his head. I'm thinking to myself, Al, the people are watching you. The match is bad enough without you amplifying how bad it is. And I don't think I could not stop laughing. My stomach hurt so badly. And Al DeRusha was one hell of a guy. And he would be at the Kenny J histiocytosis benefits every year without fail. Al was there front and center with Dr. X and with the Bachwinkles and the Bastines of the world, what have you. But Al wanted to be the auctioneer. If ever a guy was tailor-made for being an auctioneer, it was Al DeRusha. Kenny would auction off items that would benefit the Histiocytosis Foundation. And Al, he was so involved, and he loved Kenny J so much that he wanted to be the guy that would hawk the merchandise in these auctions. And if the auction was moving slowly, Al would say, come on, people, this is for a great cause. Come on, this is for Kenny's grandchild. Blah, blah. Make a ton of money for the auction. I can't say enough good things about Al DeRusha. I envy you, the relationship that you had with Al. Again, mine was purely from a business standpoint. I did not have the opportunity to get that close relationship with him. I would get answering machine message every once in a while. Mick, Al, give me a call. Well, I didn't have to think to myself, Al, who? I knew damn well who it was. And again, I'm sorry I did not get a chance to thank him at Waterloo. The last time I actually interacted with Al was at our AWA reunion when he was there with Gary, his son. And by the way, to the family of Al DeRusha, who I have known for many, many years, Gary and Glenn and by marriage, his old daughter-in-law, Mercy, who I know just worshiped the ground that Al walked on. To Al's grandkids, thank you for sharing Al with us. Even at the AWA reunion, it was kind of touch and go whether or not Al was going to be there. You and I were in contact, and Al was already feeling the effects of the disease that eventually took him from us. But that's a shot of two of the greatest guys in the world. Talk about two carnival barkers sitting next to each other. Oh my God, that's a two-man midway right there. Al DeRusha and our friend Dick Jankowski. Again, I don't have the insight to Al as the person that you did or do. But every time I saw him, I wound up laughing at some story. I wound up, and there's a shot from Waterloo. Again, that's Al, very frail at that point. But damn it, he made it to Waterloo. He made the trek. And it was so satisfying and so terrific to hear the adulation for Al DeRusha. He deserved it. That bastard no-soul Jesse Ventura on television when Ventura and Adonis went crazy on Kenny J and George Gadasky, and they were going to be suspended. Al went in the ring allegedly to be knocked to the canvas and take it was Adonis stomped Al DeRusha, and Al got up like he had just fallen down, didn't sell it. I couldn't tell if he had a smile on his face or what, but Al, had he been a wrestler, somebody would have shot on him for not selling. But it's out there on YouTube. Al bounced right back up again. I'm going to miss him. Not nearly the way that you are, the capacity that you are, Joe, but my God, he's like Wally. We've got Al DeRusha stories to last a lifetime. And every time I say the word gimmick, Al comes to mind.
I remember the showboat and that lunch when you said it. Fast forward, the 30 plus years since then. And I cannot tell you how many times in a conversation where I would refer to something as a gimmick, and the person that I'm with or people that I'm with would give me this like, what are you talking about? And sometimes I would explain, that this came from Al DeRusha because he called everything a gimmick or gimmick. Sometimes I would just let them just wonder and think about it. Back in about 2000, maybe it was 2016 or so, I had approached Al to do what I called the AWA, Stories from Behind the Lens. And we did it at this at the Croatian Hall. Yes, I've been there more than once. That's the only time I'll admit that. But what it was a collection of stories. And there's the graphic, free admission, the Croatian Hall. That was 2016. Croatian Hall had paid for us to come in and tell stories from behind the lens. The one thing that I'm proud of many things of my relationship with Al and being a part of the AWA, but there were 3 producers in the history of the AWA. It was Al DeRusha, my boss, Mike Shields, and myself. And when I approached him if he would do this with me, he had the biggest smile on his face and said, You mean I get to be with Polish Joe telling stories about the AWA? Of course I would do it. And then I just came back to him and said, it's really no different than what we do when we do the OABA Hall of Fame videos. We're doing it in front of a group of people. And I'm proud to say that when we did that, now I was out there for about 7 hours because I brought the old pay-per-views that we did, and I ended up staying and answering questions till about 9, 10 o'clock at night. Yeah, I might have had a vodka or 12. But for 2 hours solid, I looked out. It was the upstairs at the Croatian Hall. I looked out in the audience, and not only was every seat filled, it was standing room only. It wasn't for me. It was for Al DeRusha. The stories that he shared with me, with us, I had heard every single one of them multiple times. But it was a chance for all of these people to hear, I'll say it, the legend of Al DeRusha. You saw in that video the career that he had. And I was just so honored to be able to share the stage with him for those few hours. One more quick story that I got to share with you about Al. And I may have shared this on this podcast before, but whenever we'd get done with the OABA videos, the OABA would have, I'd give them the tapes or the DVDs back in the day. And their banquet was always down in Florida. And this was in February of every year. Now, by the way, that's a photo selfie I took the day that I asked Al if he would do stories from behind the lens with me. I took him out to lunch, one of many lunches that we had done. Anyway, so the OABA awards banquet was in February of every year. And every year I would get a call, look at my phone, and it'd be Al DeRusha. Well, the first time after the first year that he called me at the end of it, he would always call me up to tell me that Polish Joe, everything went great. Everybody loved the video and so forth. But I got to tell you, you're going to have to speak up. And I'm going, what, Al? Are you having a difficult time hearing me? He goes, huh? Polish Joe, you got to talk louder. I can't hear you because I'm on the beach and the waves coming in from the ocean are just too much. And so the first year I laughed. Every subsequent year, and he did this for, I would say 12, 15 years. Every time my response back to him was just a plain, simple, fuck you, Al. And he would just laugh and it was our little thing. And he did that every year. And then he would always finish those calls. Well, I shouldn't say finish, but he would, and I neglected to say this earlier, but he would, I told you about my dogs, what he would do, told you about my kids, what he would do. For my wife, he would always make sure he would say, hey, and tell Tammy from Miami hello. Oh. And so when I would tell my wife that, her comeback was always, well, tell Al from Cal I said hello. Oh. And it wasn't anything huge, but you know what? My wife, every single time, even when Al got sick and he wasn't able to come over and do the videos, I would send the video, I'd get done with them, email them to him. He'd take a look at the link and say, great job, Polish Joe. Make sure you say hi to Tammy from Miami. I'd tell her. And then I'd text Al back, hey, my wife says, say, hi to Al from Cal. And when
I got to take issue with you. That is a big deal.
Well,
you said it's no big deal. You're talking about it. It's a wonderful memory.
yes,
That is a big deal. Every one of those memories, whether it's the gimmick, whether it's even the dropping the F-bomb at Al, but that's what stays with you. And I think it's just great. Great. Look at you there, Troopy. What'd you weigh there? About 3 bills, Joe?
By that point, that was about my heaviest. I was about 230 at that point. I'm about 205 now, but that was at the Minnesota Broadcasting Hall of Fame. Al invited me to be his guest, and you saw the video earlier. He said he really wanted me there. I sat at his table and just absolutely honored. And there's Chris, there's a couple of more pics from there that I wasn't included, but there's one in particular. I think there's Al with his plaque being inducted, but there's another one that Al actually was selling in this next picture, and that's sort of a cue. I think Chris knows which photo to put up there. But this picture of nope. Well, that's a great picture, but the picture is from the Broadcasting Hall of Fame. It's Al with a bald guy.
Okay, let me look here.
The picture of Alan Barron to give you the and I laughed because Al had invited Barron and Mrs. Claus, wife Bonnie, to come to the induction as well. And I believe I had sent you the photo, but it's Al playing the part that he played so well. And unlike the whole Jesse situation, Al did sell this one. Well, I'll just describe it. This is backstage at Al's Hall of Fame induction. And Barron has got him. There you go.
There we go. Oh,
there you go. Look, that is like an absolute favorite pick of mine. Look at the glasses. Look, I mean, just phenomenal. And I to think that was 8 years ago, seems like 8 days ago. Just I laugh, I smile, and I tear up when I see those old photos. Just wow.
That's what it's all about, Joe. What a great picture. I just listening to you. I got to tell you one more quick story about Al at the Kenny J benefit. So Al is introducing the various celebrities in the audience, Red Bastien, Dr. X, Nick Bockwinkel, and he comes to Eddie Sharkey. Eddie was a mainstay at these Kenny J conventions, and Al's making the introduction, and he says, Eddie Sharkey, one half of the very famous Mr. High and Mr. Low in the AWA, along with Dick Steinborn. I'm kind of scratching my head a little bit. And after Al gets done, I went up to him and I said, Al, Eddie Sharkey was not one of Mr. High and Mr. Low. It was Dick Steinborn and Doug Gilbert. Well, Al looks behind him. He looks behind him again. I said, what are you doing? He said, is there anybody you're talking to behind me? And I said, no. He says, well, then nobody gives a shit who Eddie Sharkey teamed up with. He said, do I look like I give a shit? And that was it. And I just, why correct Al DeRusha? Believe whatever you want, Al. And God love him. Joe, your stories, the emotion, the heart, I'm telling you, it just jumps right off the screen. And this guy's going to be missed. He was a big time player in the AWA. I don't want people to lose sight of that. You know, a lot of times you think, oh, Al DeRusha shows up on TV once in a while. No, he did everything. And as you said, Joe, from production and booking the spot shows with Roger Kent and refereeing and announcing, and he did it all. And he is as important to the history of the AWA as anybody.
Yeah, and it's so important that I've got a home video of Al DeRusha. Oh, by the way, yes, before we get into it, that's Al at the Hall of Fame, and that's at the time, those are his grandchildren, and he adored them. Another part of every time we talked about, he would always talk about his grandchildren. He would always update me on who they are. And then there's another picture, Chris, that has Al, Mar, and their kids. If you can get that one up, and then I'll lead us into. It's about a 4-minute long home video.
Which one was that, Joe?
There's another one, similar background. It's Al with his wife and his children, Julie and the boys.
Okay, I'm just looking right now here.
But I want to get them in there as well, because as much as this is about Al, it's about the loss of about their father, their husband, and grandfather, and so forth. But,
okay, I think I've got it here, guys. Hold on. Sorry, I know this is kind of a little clunky.
Hey, that's AWA Unleashed. We do this live. There you go. That's the three boys. His daughter Julie, his wife of 69 years, Marlene, and of course Al there in the middle. So I sort of bring it up because this video, Al had during the pandemic, he had called me up and asked me to do some tape transfers, and I said of course. So I went over and picked up some VHS tapes, and this video that I queued up, this is Al's AWA office. This is effing classic. Thank you to the family.
Here, I'll check. Glenn, come here. I'll check. See who somebody called. I think. No.
923-3879. That's 416-923. This is George Rico calling again. I appreciate if you give me a call sometime today, because I got to discuss part of the advertising. Is this the office of Al DeRusha?
What?
Is this Al DeRusha's office?
Yes, it is.
You have a call from Vince McMahon from New York.
Tell Vince I'm on the phone with Vern Gagne, and Jim Crockett's holding on the other line. He's going to have to wait. Fritz Von Erich is on line 3. I got Vince on line 1, Fritz Von Erich on 2, and Jim Crockett on 3. He's going to have to wait. Hulk Hogan's on 4.
That's what he was calling about. He wanted to book Hulk Hogan for Wilmer, Minnesota.
Tell him Hulk is already booked in Sleepy Eye in the main event.
Okay.
And Ed Cohen, if Ed Cohen calls, tell him he's booked in Anoka.
And
You're shot of my fish, Glenn.
And yes, that was not. I mean, it was staged, but that was Al. Al loved to have fun, to joke around, and look at the mic cube from the WWF days. in his fish wall mount. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the one that talks.
Big promotions.
Oh, it's not mine.
Oh, this is
It's Lloyd's.
Look
Like
at some
Balcom
of
production
the
here.
collection of stuff that he kept. He cherished,
Lighting,
absolutely
roast,
loved
the
it.
whole thing.
His kids are going to have they've seen it for years, but they're going to have so much fun.
Normandale Cooler Night.
Look at that. Schmidt beer.
What's the big infatuation with the here? Bob Gondorf. I got my Normandale Cooler Night, 1985. Big Al was there.
I think that's one of the
Bob
sons.
Flanders, shortstop, All-Star game, 8/18/85.
Ed Juice?
I think so.
Pal. Yeah, Dan. See him?
Oh,
Dennis Hillgard. Big
Wally.
Al. At Vern's retirement party, his first one.
You heard him say, "Oh, they're pal." That's how he referred to
Al in
Wally.
San Francisco. Dr. X. Oh, here. Oh. Oh, call workman's comp.
The Jabroni Open.
The Jabroni Open.
Gary.
Uncle George, Gary,
Fat
Al,
Raj.
and the Prez. Roger Kent. Old and bent. Turn it over. Okay, now we can go look at that. Oh, here's Bob's gin score where I, what did I do? Blitz him 3 times there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love
Blitzed
this,
him
Joe.
3 times. Yeah.
It's been a long time since I've seen this, and you know, I didn't ask the family, and I remembered this and saw this as I was looking through files,
Oh, here's Glenn.
but I'd scanned through it, and I don't think that's the end of it. I don't think it's gonna create any issues, but just you got a glimpse of Al. Not, I mean, he was in front of a camera, but it wasn't with the lights or whatever. That opening shtick that he did, that opening gimmick that he did, that was Al. If you had the pleasure and the honor of meeting him, you can't help but smile. If you really got to know him, you couldn't help but love him. One of the last times I talked with Al, I told him that. I told him that I loved him. He had been diagnosed with a brain tumor. I think it's probably a couple of years ago. He, at his age, he had decided, he wasn't going to fight it. The surgery would have been life-threatening. The chemo would have made his last time horrendous dealing with the chemo, and would have been horrendous because of the level of chemo that he would have had to have gone through. And when he called me and told me that that was his decision, he followed it up and said, I'm gonna go out on my terms. Yeah, it's not going to be easy, but I don't want to deal with the chemo. I don't want to deal with going to the doctor's office. What's it going to do? Maybe get me a couple of months, maybe a year. It wasn't going to cure him. It wasn't going to get rid of the cancer. Al wanted to go out the way he lived his life. Fun. He made, every year they would have, the family would have a golf tournament in Wisconsin. And for years, Al would have me design the invite that he would send to his family. And if I'm not mistaken, he actually made it this past year. He and Mar, they both made it. They got Al out Had him in a golf cart. Of course, he didn't get out of it, but he drove around in a golf cart like he had done so many times and so many years before. Even had a drink. I can't remember if it was, I think it was scotch or bourbon that Al would just like to have a little glass, little gimmick there in a glass. And one last time he was able to attend that one, as we've talked about. He was able to attend Waterloo, get the honor he so richly deserved, and was brought to tears. And Al was not somebody that you could bring to tears, but I think that was an example of him knowing that his time was near and appreciating the recognition that he was getting from an industry that he loved and was a part of for so many years.
Joe, thank you, my friend, for the insight into Al. What can you say? Al DeRusha was Al DeRusha. You talk about lives that are well lived, experiences. If I had 1/100th of the experiences that Al did, I'd be a lucky guy. If I had 1/100th of the talent and was able to do so much in so many different directions that Al did, I'd be a lucky guy. You were blessed to know him. And again, as we kind of take this home, as we take the gimmick home, once again to Al's family, I'm probably closest with his daughter-in-law, Mercy. And I know I said earlier on, she just, every time I talked to her, always talked about Al, and he's going to be missed desperately. And again, ladies and gentlemen, it's a wrestling podcast. Look up Al DeRusha. I think Joe has done a remarkable job. Hang on. Just a minute. Hang on.
Hello. Seriously, how long do you want me to talk, Al? Fuck you. I know that there's waves coming in. Just kidding. Had to do that one last.
It wouldn't surprise me if he was still calling you. He and Wally are probably sitting together with Kenny J, having a brandy or two. As we take it home, ladies and gentlemen, again, I thank you for indulging us. This is not what we anticipated doing this week. We're dropping this early. We're going to carry it over into next week when, as we're taping Al's services, are scheduled to happen. We want to leave this week to Al DeRusha. So I know we've got one photo, Chris, if we could get it up there as we take it home.
And as we take it home, I see that picture, and what comes to mind, Chris, you can take Mick and I off if you don't mind, and just leave this up with Al, and I'll leave it with these words that pop to mind. Elapsed time, almost 89 years. Elapsed time, almost 89 years. Love you, Al.